Hey everyone, it's Brooks Kubik and John Wood. We're back for another episode of Dinosaur Radio. And in today's episode, John and I wanted to pick up on a theme from the last episode, specifically the topic of progression in your training and how to make each workout progressively better and harder than the workout before, which of course is the key to getting good results from your training. As I've said before, and as others have said, the name of the game is progressive strength training. And that means your goal is to do a workout and then do a harder and heavier workout, a more intense workout. And then the next time you train, continue the progression and make that workout harder and more difficult, more challenging. Your body adapts to the overload in each workout, and it adapts by growing stronger and in most cases by becoming larger in terms of muscle mass, bone mass, cartilage mass. I mean, obviously not 20 pounds per workout or something enormous, but very, very slight increments that over time add up to really big gains in strength, in power, and in muscle mass. And that really is the whole secret of training in a nutshell, but it's something that seems to elude the vast majority of trainees. So we thought we'd drill down and focus on that. John, do you have an example of a weekly training program and a realistic weekly progression with one particular exercise? Squat, deadlift, presses, clean and press, curls, hand grippers, anything you want to use as an example, I think will illustrate the point for people.
It's pretty straightforward regardless of what equipment I use because the model is almost always going to be exactly the same. There are some exceptions, and we can talk about those later. But with a barbell or any lift that can be adjusted where the weight can be adjusted easily, to me, it's real simple. I'm a fan of the one set to failure type of training, and part of the reason is that it's so simple that it takes out all the complexity of having to figure out percentages and wave cycles and things like that. It's to me, it couldn't be simpler. Is that I take a weight, I go out and I do 10 reps with a certain weight, and then I recover a couple days later and I come back and I can do 12 or 13 reps with that same weight. So if in fact that happens, it indicates that recovery has taken place and the remodeling, the muscle growth has in fact occurred, and then I just keep that up and forevermore. It's pretty simple. And then eventually if something starts to slow down or I hit a plateau, you change the weight, you can make it higher, you can make it lower, repeat the process over again, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there's really not a whole lot more to it.
Do you do that on all of the exercises that you use or only on certain movements?
I do that on probably 70, 80% of the exercises that I do. Sometimes the other exercises where I don't do one set to failure, it may have to do with the type of exercise that I'm doing, something where there's not an easy way to measure progression, such as something that is like a stone or a sandbag or something like that, something where you can't add a few pounds like you would with a barbell. Sometimes with other exercises, it's also a matter of variety. Sometimes I do multiple sets, but it's also still progressive in at least one way, sometimes a couple different ways. But either way, progression always takes place, and there's always a means of knowing that. And so that can be the measuring stick for the next workout or the workout after that.
I assume that to make this work, you keep detailed notes of each workout.
Yes, very much so. I have training logs going back to around, I think, 14 or 15 years old.
Wow. You've got a complete library of training
Pretty
logs.
much, yeah. I mean, and that's also good for me because I can see what I did, what I was doing a year ago, what exercises worked. It's funny because I'll look through the pages and I can't do it just offhand, but as I flip through the pages, I'll remember something about the different workouts that I've gone through, even if it was 10 years ago.
You ought to think about turning those into a book or training courses, just sharing them with the world, letting people see the progression, the different things, the way it worked from week to week and month to month when you were in your teens, your 20s, 30s, and how they're working for you now in your 40s?
It really hasn't changed. I don't know what people are doing out there, but for me, this has worked. It's worked well. I've continued to get stronger. No, I'm not lifting world record poundages, but I'm still lifting as hard as I ever did. And I know I'm getting stronger because it's reflected in the numbers that are coming through in my workout. So I don't need to be frustrated or be confused as to whether it's working. I know for a fact.
One of the related things that I've covered a lot and that I want to throw out to the readers because I think it's very important is the idea of what Bob Hoffman used to refer to in the old York courses as single progression and double progression. And to anyone out there listening who, when I lay this out, sits down and types up a comment or sends me an email and says, no, that's not the right definition of single progression or double progression or triple progression or whatever, let me note that I'm talking about the original definition used by Hoffman in the York courses. The terms have been used by many people and they've been given many different definitions, but I'm talking about the original Hoffman York Barbell Company training course definition. So single progression means you start off with a certain number of reps as your goal rep. For example, 5 or 6 reps in upper body exercises, 8, 10, or 12 reps in lower body exercises. And you use a particular weight for the targeted number of reps. And in the next workout, when you do that same exercise, you use the same weight, but you add one more rep. And in the workout after that, you add one more rep. And you keep going that way until you've doubled the number of reps. So for example, you might be doing barbell presses with 60 pounds for 6 reps. And you stay at that weight until you gradually increase all the way up to 12 reps. At that point, you add a small amount of weight, usually 2.5 pounds on each side. So that would take our hypothetical 60-pound press to 65 pounds. And you drop the reps back to 6, and you gradually build them back up. In the lower body exercises, Hoffman typically suggested adding 2 reps every time you train a particular exercise. So in the squat, for example, or the deadlift, you might start at 10 reps. Next workout, you're going for 12, then 14, 16, 18, 20. And at that point, you drop back to the original lower rep count, increase the weight, and build back up and repeat the process. That sounds a lot like what you're doing. It's interesting that what you're doing goes back to courses written in the 1930s, which were based on, I assume, training methods or books or courses out there or articles or some source of information that Hoffman used to figure out what he put on paper. You also have, though, and I think this is really important for all of our older listeners, what Hoffman referred to as double progression. And double progression doesn't mean you gain twice as fast, or you increase both sets and reps, or you increase reps and weight, or something like that. What it means is you stay at a particular weight and a particular rep count for 2 workouts before increasing. So single progression, you increase every workout. Double progression, you do a workout with a given weight for a given number of reps. Then you repeat that workout, taking advantage of what Hoffman referred to as the stabilizing principle. And then in the third workout, you increase the rep count. And so what you're doing is you're progressing, but you're slowing it down a little bit. So if you're listening to this and you're listening to what John is saying and you're saying, that sounds great, but I don't know if I can keep increasing the rep count in my exercises every time I train. Well, in that case, try double progression. And instead of shooting to do it every time you train, shoot to do it every other workout. You could conceivably, and this might be great for trainees in their 60s, 70s, or older, you might try what we can refer to as triple progression, where you do a workout with a given weight, given number of reps, you repeat it a second time, you repeat it a third time, and then in the fourth workout, that's your progression workout. That's where you either increase the weight or that's where you increase the reps. Not exactly what you're doing, but similar.
It's all sound. It's all systematic. It all makes sense. You don't have to walk in to the weight room that day and say, "What am I doing today?" You know exactly what you're doing. And a note that no one else would be able to speak to, it's interesting that you mentioned sticking with the same amount of weight because a couple years ago, one of the things that I tried, I think I was doing dips, maybe, or maybe it was presses. I don't remember what specific exercise I was doing, but I was timing the amount of time it took to perform a certain amount of reps that I was doing. And I kept track of that just because I was curious to see what would happen. And what I found was that there were certain times when I would get the same number of reps with a certain weight, but the amount of time that it took to do those reps was higher or longer. So, in a sense, my muscular system was putting out more power in the with the same amount of weight, and thus progression was actually taking place, even though I was getting the same number of reps.
Makes sense. Did you ever try doing that with lower body exercises? Sounds like it'd be interesting with lower body movements.
I don't think I have, but I think it would find the same result. I think your body finds ways to progress, even if it's not evident in the reps. I mean, the rep is just an arbitrary way of measuring what you're doing. It may not reflect everything that's going on physiologically, which is, I think, what I found. I think that as you repeat a workout with the same weight, your body is more acclimated. It may be more neurologically efficient or things like that, so that you actually do your reps better from workout to workout. It's certainly effective. I think that it's something very much worth trying for most people.
That's yeah, I would agree with that. Now, we've been talking a little bit about situations where you're training with something where you can't adjust the weight very easily. For example, that body weight exercises would be an example. Another example of that would be if you're training with sandbags or if you're training with a rock or a log or some kind of fixed weight object. I mean, you can add weight in those situations, but it's a little bit more time consuming, a little bit more difficult. One of the things that fascinates me is looking at the training of actual true old time strongmen and weightlifters. Back in the day when people often trained with fixed weight barbells. So you might have, for example, a 50-pound barbell, an 80-pound barbell, and a 120-pound barbell. Well, what do you do with those different barbells? Or what if you have a 100-pound barbell, a 140-pound barbell, and a 200-pound barbell? What do you do? If you think about it, the obvious answer is you naturally gravitate towards doing more difficult exercises, such as, for example, in terms of weight, how much weight you can use. So you're going to use the lighter fixed weight object for things like curls, reverse curls, front raises, things like that. And then a heavier barbell you might use for presses, you might use it for bent over rowing, upright rowing, shrugs, whatever. And then you get up to the really heavier weight, and you might use that for squats or deadlifts. That might be the weight that you try to lift overhead in a clean and jerk or clean and push press type thing. The other thing that they would do is do one arm movements with lighter weights and two arm movements with heavier fixed weights. And the other thing, of course, is that they would train reps until they were able to move up to a heavier weight. So, for example, there were lots of strongmen who trained the clean and press or a clean followed by multiple reps in the press by doing as many as they could.
Mhm.
And given the particular weight that you had, you might do 8, 10, 12, 15, 20. And that's what you did because that's what you had to do to get a good workout with that particular barbell. That was a really interesting way of training because it included naturally lots of variety. And anytime you're training with fixed weight, a fixed weight object, you have to be creative, shall we say?
Mhm.
One thing that you can do, and I assume the old timers did this, although the first notice that I've seen about it, the first actual write-ups were by George Jowett in the 20s. Pause reps.
Mhm.
You're doing a press, for example, and instead of doing 20 reps, you do 10 reps, but you include a 5-second pause on each rep. Or instead of doing 10 reps, you do 5 reps with pauses. That's a way of progressing without having to add weight. And in a situation where you're maxed out on your reps, you're saying, I've done as many as I want to do. I want to figure out another way to progress. So, it's interesting how many different ways there are to actually make your workouts harder and more intense and more progressive without dramatically increasing the length of time that you're training, without increasing your volume, keeping the workout at 45, 60 minutes, 75 minutes tops, perhaps for most people. You can get an awful lot done. You just have to be creative about it.
Sure,
Thought.
sure. But I think also if you look at what we're saying, when some people have a bad workout or what they would call a bad workout, what their mind defaults to is I must be slacking. So I should do extra reps. I should come back tomorrow and do another workout. They believe that training is scalable and that the more they do, the better they should get, the better results they should get. And they only end up painting themselves into a corner insofar as overtraining, and it just goes down from there. So they don't really have a means of understanding what the process is supposed to be in the first place. All they know is more is better. And that begins a whole downward spiral into other mindsets and attitudes and behaviors that it always ends up problematic.
Well, yeah. And when you said all they know is more is better, that's really more of a case of all they think they know.
Mhm.
More is better. That's the natural default. I've got to do more as opposed to I've got to do better at what I'm doing
Mhm.
by adding a rep, by adding a small amount of weight, by doing the reps in better form, all those types of things that we've been talking about. Do you ever use micro loading?
I do. It depends on the weight or it depends on the type of lift. I think that some lifts are better than others. If you look at curls, for example, the average person probably can curl 100 pounds by the time they're in high school, and they won't get to 150 pounds for the rest of their life. So even a couple pounds at a time or a few ounces at a time, if you can maintain progression, then that's going to work there. Whereas in a squat, you'll probably between the time you start and a decade or two later, you probably double the amount of weight you use in a squat or a press or something like that. So
It's
microloading makes a lot more sense for the lifts where the top end is not that high.
Mhm. Well, and similarly in those types of exercises, jumping 5 pounds at a time, percentage wise, is often problematic.
Yeah.
Whereas jumping 5 pounds, if you're squatting 300 pounds, a 5 pound increase is relatively minimal.
Yep.
Check my math on that, but isn't that like less than 2%? Yeah, it's less than 2%.
Yeah.
Do you ever apply this type of progression to single reps in any exercise? Have you ever done that?
Everything I do is progressive in some way. So with one set, it's obvious when you're talking about a singles or doubles or triples, things of that nature, everything's still progressive. You still would use volume in a sense as the independent variable, but it's still progression. I think that, and this may be something we talk about at another time, but volume training for a lot of people, their attitude is, well, that just gives me license to just spend all day in the gym. And since more is better, it's just accumulating like my bank account. And we know that that's not the case at all. If you use volume as an independent variable, then chances are you're using much heavier weights, much lower reps, and you're not talking about a lot of sets here. You're talking about 4 or 5 to 10, maybe singles.
Mhm.
And you're not doing it with every exercise. You maybe do it with one exercise, maybe two if you're pushing it, but you're talking about a major exercise, a deadlift, for example, or a clean and press or something like that. But once you're using a large percentage of the weight that you're able to use for singles or doubles, you're not going to feel like doing a whole lot else besides that.
I often write about something I do in my own workouts and have done quite often. Multiple sets of singles, which works very well for me in my weightlifting based workouts. And what I often do is with a given weight, my heavy weight, my working weight for the day, I will progressively work up to that poundage. I will do one single and I stop. And the next workout, if I'm doing a single progression system, I do two singles. Workout after that, three, four in the next, five in the workout after that. And usually when I get up to five, I'll increase the weight and I will drop back to one, two, or three singles and build back up. But that works very well. And if you note, that's 5 single reps. So if you look at the total tonnage as a measure of the volume in your workout, it's the same as if you were doing one set of 5 reps. It's not high volume workouts. So, a lot of people when they, as you alluded to, a lot of people in their work, a lot of people think of high volume as 5 sets of 10, 5 sets of 20 on 5 different exercises for each body part. You're training for 2 hours at a time. And that's absolutely not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a workout that may take 25 to 35, maybe 40 or 45 minutes, consisting of perhaps a total of, including warm-ups, progressively heavier warm-up sets, 15 to 20, maybe 25 singles, which is not a lot. Again, 25 reps, 25 lifts is 5 sets of 5 reps. And if you don't want to do singles, you can do this with doubles, you can do it with triples, you can do it with fives.
Yeah.
You can do it with 6 rep sets, 8 rep sets, whatever. But what you'll find is 5 sets of 5 in a given exercise, if you go after it progressively, that's as much as you want and as much as you need. And I'm not talking about 5 sets of 5 with your top weight. I'm talking about a warm-up set, which would probably be around 60% of your top weight for 5 reps, followed by 70%, 80%, 90%, and then 100%. You're really only doing one really top weight heavy set, but you're building up to it, and your total volume is 25 reps.
Mhm.
It doesn't take a lot of work to trigger the growth stimulus for the body. And I think that's one thing that, gosh, the more we say it, we've been saying it for years. We've both written thousands, tens of thousands of words on this, but it just seems so difficult for people to accept.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're conditioned to believe more is better in all many different facets of our life. And it's just, this is not the way the process works. But then also people, I think, like I say, the first thought for most people, if they have a bad workout, is that I'm not doing enough. That must be the reason. And then they just go, or they just figure that they can adjust the weight and do 20-pound curls for an hour, and they think that that's what is gonna lead to the results that they're looking for. And it's really just what they typically refer to as junk volume. It's just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. And it's really what you find is that's just not, it just overloads your system. It just increases the recovery time. It doesn't increase the results, the potential results that you're going to get.
Yeah, yeah.
Until they get injured, until they get some kind of inflamed tendon or pull something or tear something or something like that, and then they have no choice but to take time off.
That pretty well sums up what happens in most cases, unfortunately.
And if you are in an overtrained state, the likelihood that you're going to be injured increases substantially.
That's absolutely true. John, I was at a high school wrestling tournament that was hosted at our high school. It was a 5-team dual meet tournament. So they had 5 schools and they had 4 mats going, and it was a dual meet round robin type thing. So everybody wrestled 5 matches, okay, during the course of a day. That's a lot of wrestling matches in one day. And what I noticed was about the third or fourth, definitely into the fourth and fifth round robin, that's when the injuries started happening.
Mm.
People would land wrong, step wrong, they'd twist a knee, hurt themselves somehow or another. They had 2 athletic trainers there, and they were, busy. I mean, wrestling's a tough sport, but it was the fatigue factor.
Mm-hmm.
And these were well-conditioned athletes. I mean, they were able to wrestle a 6-minute high school wrestling match, which, that requires a lot of conditioning. And yet it was really hard to keep that going for a really long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of a warning to anybody out there who jumps into a training program. They don't have a good conditioning base. They're not used to hard training. And they decide, for example, I'm going to use so-and-so's Mr. Everything bodybuilding program, and I'm going to train 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And it's like, no, you are not conditioned to do anything like that. And as you said, that's an injury waiting to happen.
And I don't know why you'd want to. I don't know why you'd want to spend. I mean, if you can get extremely good results by doing less than 3 hours in the gym per week, then why would you want to spend 6 or 10? There's just so much to do out there anyway that I don't understand the mindset of just wanting to be there and do stuff when it's not helping you. It's going to be a negative in the long run. It's going to increase your likelihood of injury. It's not going to help your results. If anything, it's just going to make it harder for you to get any kind of results at all.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it there. But before signing off, I want to throw something out for all of the listeners, and that is leave some feedback. Tell us what works for you. What kind of progression system are you following? What kind of progression system has worked well for you in the past? How old are you? Are you still training? Are you still progressing? And how do you measure your progress? Do you do it by weight, reps, maximum single, maximum weight for a given number of reps? If so, how many? By increasing your strength in various bodyweight exercises, by increasing your ability with grippers, by increasing your muscle mass, DEXA scans, measurements. How are you measuring progression? Let us know. And these are things that we can pick up and follow up with in future episodes. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate everyone out there who's listening. Take care and train hard.